She's on drugs or something. No, I'm totally, I just hate you. I hate. Okay, we're calling the cops on you because you're disturbing everyone in here. But the law says I can't kill them. If the law didn't say that I couldn't kill them, they'd all be dead.
Well, here's the thing. White America has been raised to believe, A, the police are always the good guys, and frankly, that black lives matter less than white comfort.
You have this imaginary wall around you. I don't know who damaged you. And me being a black man, I have to suffer for what somebody did to you? That has nothing to do with me. I'm not the enemy. I get that a lot from black women, that we're the enemy, we're liars, cheaters, we're dogs.
As a film director, you want to talk to those who just loving these brothers, these rappers. In fact, rappers such as Rick Ross, rappers such as Lil Wayne, those out there having you falling in love with that nonsense, having fallen in love with thinking that that's reality when they're talking about violence. But they living other than that. See, they walking around with bodyguards and etc. And they got you out here gangbanging, got you out here shooting and killing one another. But listen, all that, the reality of it is when I see you. When I see you, it's over. It's over. Why? You're dead. You're dead. You're dead. You're dead.
Hey, this is Perry L. Duff coming at you live from the Hustler's Corner, New York City. Saying thank you for joining us again in this part 7 of our final session with James Ellis. We regret to inform you that James Ellis has been prohibited from doing any more recordings with any more podcasts or shows like the Hustler's Corner. However, we finish out this final session with Candace Hudson, a woman who has staunchly represented James through her organization for years. And we also talk about how the corruption in the case has led to the revealing of him being actually set up, and to one particular person who, through who the prosecution in this case nearly fell apart. So hold on to your seats. This is a good one. Thank you for joining us. This is Perry L. Duff coming at you live. And as always, like, share, don't forget to leave a comment, and most of all, subscribe. Thank you, and enjoy the show. This is Perry L. Duff coming at you live from the Hustler's Corner, New York City. And I'm here with Candace Hudson, who represents James Ellis, a man who's incarcerated for a murder he did not commit. Now, I want to ask you, what is the status update for James Ellis since we last spoke?
Well, what happened with him is the prison investigator pulled him to the side and told him that he was no longer allowed to do podcasts or interviews or anything of that sort, and that he would speak to him the next week. The case manager came to him and told him that he was just no longer allowed to do any of it, or he would get severe repercussions. So my organization made a few calls to the prison and to find out what was going on, because everybody does interviews. Everybody does podcasts, blogs, radio interviews. They're on the TV. Everybody does it in all the prisons in Ohio. So we were just trying to figure out why he was being singled out. And they came back with him getting a ticket for making a three-way call. And because that was really the only thing they could get him with, was making the three-way call. Because social media is not the same as like news media, news station trying to go in and do an interview. So in the meantime, he's just waiting to see if this ticket goes to RID, which is Rules and Infraction Board, to see if he's going to get any type of his privileges or whatever taken away.
Okay.
So that's what he's doing right now.
Let me ask you, the thing is that how did they find out that he was doing this podcast? Did he tell them? Did he let them know? Or
they had to have either heard, saw on the page, because it came from a radio station that he had done an interview with, but it was still online station. It's just a social media station. So
I would like this to continue, because it's obvious to me that the reason why they shut James Ellis down is because he's putting information out there that they don't want people to find out.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah, I think that, he's, and there, but the thing is that what people like the one that you just mentioned to me that shut James Ellis down don't realize is that this has become a movement across the entire board, all over the country. I'm getting interview requests for people in California, people in Ohio, people in Pennsylvania, people here in New York, people all over the country. There are people that desperately want to get their stories out, and
right.
And because these inmates are coming forth, and ones that are no longer incarcerated, they're coming forth with their stories as well. And from what they are, our stories, like James Ellis' story, is starting to blow the lid off of the corruption in the criminal justice system. It's starting to blow the lid right off of and exposing the criminal justice system for what it really is. And
right.
But how far reaching it goes is what's really catching me off guard. I mean, I'm finding out things like one of our guests has explained to me that one of the people that has invested in the prison industrial system is Michael Jordan. I was like, what? I couldn't believe it, and we're finding out things like this. And, the prison industrial complex has become the new manufacturing sector for this country to get their products made at a ridiculously cheap cost. And they're doing everything they can to railroad people like James Ellis behind bars to supplement this system. And, by all of these nefarious means and all of these lies and implanting of false evidence and planting of drugs and framing and the list just goes on and on and on, and it's insane how much we're finding out. Now, what can you do as far as your organization is concerned to help battle the situation with James Ellis, and what can be done to what do you think would be the next steps that we could take to help with James Ellis' situation?
Well, as far as the podcast and them doing interviews and things like that, rules are rules, and if they have those rules set in place, then that it is just what it is. But like you said, he is being targeted. He does have a case that is pending in the federal court. One of the things here is the fact that James was charged and convicted of a crime that happened 6 years prior to when he was actually arrested. And in those 6 years, that case went unsolved. The prosecutors and the associates knew they weren't going to find the original offender. James Ellis was an easy target given all of his criminal history, and especially the run-ins that he had with the lead detective.
Mm-hmm.
They had already determined that James did not commit the rape on Miss Utter. He was exonerated by DNA. And, all of a sudden, 6 years later, there was a partial thumbprint pointing to him that also pointed to 17 other people. When there was one other person that was questioned, and that man said, yes, it probably is my thumbprint because he was a maintenance person there, I believe, at her house.
Right.
But she was really. The prosecution's main witness was this lead detective, Daryl Reed. And when he got on the stand and started lying and got caught up in some things, their whole prosecution started crumbling.
Say that again, the whole prosecution what?
It started crumbling because he was the main witness. And now their main witness is on the stand lying and admitting that he was, buying drugs or doing drugs, and that he had a relationship with, he was in a common law marriage for 17 years to James Ellis and his girlfriend. And that was their lead witness to bring James back into court. Now that's falling apart because he's not reliable. Not only that, but then they brought up the fact that this man had pistol with James at one point.
This, from what I'm seeing here, from what you're telling me now that he was, first he was incarcerated for something that happened 6 years prior?
No, this crime happened 6 years prior to him being incarcerated.
Okay.
So for 6 years, this crime went unsolved until James started dating the lead detective's common law wife.
Uh-huh.
And then all of a sudden, he's arrested, and the prosecution's lead witness was this lead detective who lied on the stand and openly admitted that he was buying drugs and whatever else he lied about, the pistol whipping and things like that. And he just felt like those were things that he didn't need to tell, and they wouldn't have known except for the investigators that James' family hired heard it all out in the hallway. So when all of this started crumbling down, they were in a panic. So now all of a sudden, James' attorneys they weren't public defenders, but they were definitely state-hired attorneys, went to James because one of the witnesses, I believe her name was Miss Mack, had said that she believed that James' brother had did the crime. So they had went to James and told James that he needed to tell this story that his brother David did it, and to raise reasonable doubt. But if you really read the article and what happened, the prosecution, nobody ever looked for David. And it says that he was visible in and out of the courthouse, but he was never questioned. His DNA was never tested, none of that, because they already knew that was a made-up story. James is from the streets. No way was he going to snitch on his brother, or he would have took the fall for it if that really happened. The prosecution, I believe they even said that they weren't going to cross-examine about David because they already knew that was a made-up story. That story was never meant to raise reasonable doubt. That story was meant to place James Ellis at the scene of the crime because that was the only way they were going to get him. Their whole prosecution fell apart because of that lead detective.
Mm-hmm.
That was only way they were going to place James Ellis at the scene of the crime. And not only that, but there was a woman who lived, I think, across the street, and her house had gotten broken into. She was an elderly woman as well, and she had gotten roughed up by kind of a known thug in the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
But he was never questioned or anything either.
So this was a clear-cut case of black man with a criminal history, therefore justifies considering making his life virtually worthless and throwing him behind bars. Never mind whether he committed the crime or not, because he's done things in the past that automatically makes it acceptable to dispose of his life. Am I correct?
Right. That and the fact that he had an affair with the lead detective's common law wife. That was the only reason why he was sitting in that courtroom.
So James Ellis was involved with this detective's common law wife while they were still together, when the detective and the common law wife were still together?
I believe she had left him. James had served some time for receiving stolen property, I believe, and when he got out, he had gotten a job, and it just so happened that I believe she worked there too.
Mm-hmm.
And she wanted to meet him, so his brother had said, I have this girl that wants to meet you. And it happened to be this lead detective's common-law wife.
Mm-hmm.
So they end up together.
Mm-hmm.
And she never told him. She was even visiting him during the trial while he was in jail. But none of this was ever brought up. Records could show she was there, and she was telling him, he's setting you up. You're being set up. And that's what she was going to the jail to tell him. And there were several people that wanted to testify at his trial, and his attorneys decided against it.
This concludes this session of the Hustler's Corner in New York City. If you are a person that's incarcerated and you have books that you'd like to get out and you want to share your story, come share your story on the Hustler's Corner in New York City Tales from the Pit series. If you are a person who has been wrongfully convicted of a crime that you did not commit and you want to share your story, come share your story on the Hustler's Corner in New York City Victims of the System series. If you are a person who has been self-reformed, active in the community, came out of a past nefarious life to a more positive one, and you want to share your story, come share your story on the Hustler's Corner in New York City Legends of the Hood series. If you are a Black business owner and you want to share your story of how you got your business off the ground and how you faced many challenges to succeed, come share your story on the Hustler's Corner New York City Black Business Movement series. If you are a musician or an artist or a vocalist or a rap or hip hop artist and you want to share your story about your career and how you have grown it into success, come share your story on the Hustler's Corner New York City On the Grind series. And if you are a woman who has been through traumatic times in her life only to overcome them, come share your story on the Hustler's Corner New York City Lipstick Stories series. And if you're enjoying the show, please help us grow. Show your love. Like, share, leave a comment, and most of all, subscribe. Thank you for joining us. Looking forward to seeing you again. This is Perry L. Duff from the Hustler's Corner, New York City.
My numbers been drawn, and I could never measure up or measure it all. I am but a man with no grace of my own. Look at my hands, I am not scarred for you all. This is why I fall down at the feet of the king. Submission is a mission, I receive it every day. I am but a vessel, he leads me through my faith until the day that I see